Envase Technologies creates a suite of solutions that makes it easier to run your trucking business. For drivers and carriers, our solutions put control back in your hands with a TMS, capacity and storage marketplace, and rate management system. Optimize your operations with less administrative headaches and increase the value of your time spent on and off the clock. Envase Technologies, driving progress, delivering innovation. For more information, visit envasetechnologies.com. That's ENVASE Technologies.com.
Hey, supply chainers, wherever you are in the world, this is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey with you today. Are you ready? Let's talk supply chain. Good morning, everyone, and happy Tuesday. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the Blended Podcast, and the founder of the Blended Pledge. And I'm super excited to be here with you today. We've got my trade bestie, Audrey Ross. She's going to be coming in with some hot takes, some updates, and so much more because we got lots happening in supply chain, lots to talk about. But before we get into what's happening at Let's Talk Supply Chain, let's hear from our show sponsor. So are you ready to find your community? If you're struggling to find a supply chain community of like-minded professionals where you can level up, network, learn about best practices from experts in supply chain, professional development, and marketing, look no further. We created the Secret Society of Supply Chain to provide a safe space, a community for everyone in supply chain. We offer unique opportunities for everyone to connect and grow in our three distinct value-packed communities: the supply chainers, women in supply chain, and the creative room. From the learn at your own pace, content-rich approach of the supply chainers to the empowering community-focused space of women in supply chain and the marketing mastermind of the creative room, we mean it when we say there's truly a place for everyone. So head over to the Secret Society of Supplychain.com to explore which community is right for you. All right, so we've got a brand new episode with Peter from OneRail, and we recorded this one at Manifest just a few weeks ago, talking about getting 100% visibility over your final mile. Some of the conversations that I was having at Manifest was really around the last mile, the final mile, how important it is. People are looking when they are shopping, they want next day delivery. And I think somebody said the fastest move by drone was like 15 minutes or something like that, from picking to actually delivering the order. And so things are speeding up. That final mile, that last mile really is the differentiator between whether somebody's going to buy from you or not. So go and check this episode out wherever you listen to the show. It was a fun one to do at Manifest, and I think you'll get a lot from it because Peter's been on both sides. He worked for Target, and now he's on the supply chain tech side, so he brings a lot of great perspectives. All right. Next, we've got LogTech Live with Eric Johnson. He is going live at 10 a.m. Eastern on Friday for the Mexican Freight Fiesta, Tech, Turmoil, and VCs. Well, strap in because I'm sure he's got a lot to talk about with TPM coming up on March 3rd as well. So click the attend button, even if you can't attend live, and I will send you the recording. Next, we've got a brand new episode of Blended. It's called Preference versus Bias. And this discussion came out of a conversation that I had with somebody, a good friend of mine, pretty much the same time last year, because it was right after TPM, and she challenged me, and I talk about that particular conversation in this episode. So go and check that out wherever you listen to the Blended podcast. And of course, we can't talk about Blended without talking about the Blended Pledge. This is our LinkedIn page. Go and follow it. We talk all about DEI. We talk about what we've got coming up. We talk about how you can apply for our grants because we really need some people to apply for those grants. If you've got a speaking opportunity coming up, then apply and we can help you with those travel expenses. Last but not least, we've got the Secret Society of Supply Chain. I know I just spoke about it, but I wanted to let you know that on International Women's Day, we have a special discount coming up for this. Now, we launched our first cohort a couple weeks ago. We've got the second one that we are building right now, and you're not going to want to miss it because we've got a ton of great testimonials coming out just from the first meeting. And we've got a great discount coming up on March 8th. So stay tuned so you can learn more about that. All right. Let's bring up Audrey Ross. Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
How you doing?
Good afternoon. Good evening to some of our friends
Oh, yes.
who are tuning in.
Yes. Well, thanks for joining me today. How you doing today?
For sure. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty
Good. I'd like to know where everybody is tuning in from. So if you want to pop a comment in, let me know. We'd love to give you a shout out. We love giving shout outs on Thoughts and Coffee. So make sure that you put your questions, your comments, where you're tuning in from. I'd appreciate that. So for anybody who doesn't know you, Miss Audrey, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
Sure. So I'm Audrey Ross. I'm tuning in from Toronto, where it's been relatively sunny the last few days, which has been different for us. I'm currently the Import-Export Compliance Manager at Orchard Custom Beauty, or IBG. Keep myself busy. I think we're shipping now. We're between like 20 different countries. We ship cosmetics, beauty tools, bath accessories,
I love it. Well, so before we started this show, you know how I said there was 30 seconds left and then Nicole was like, no, we're about to go live. I don't know if anybody knows anything about Mac. I think it's a Mac Mini. Anyways, I have to call them because this morning I turned on my computer and it said March 31st, 1976.
Ooh.
I know. I was like, no wonder I'm behind, but 30 seconds isn't bad to compared to what I started at this morning.
Yeah. Maybe you actually time traveled and you don't know.
Well, this keeps happening, I think. And then it was 7 p.m. So the time was 7 p.m. So everything on my computer is dark. Because it thinks it's nighttime now in 1976. I don't know. Such a random date
before
and time.
It was even invented. Yes.
So I have to call Apple, and I've been meaning to do that for a couple of weeks because my Mac Mini is going on the fritz a little bit. But anyways. All right, let's talk about the poll of the week. So we ask you a question every single Wednesday morning on our Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn and Instagram. And we really like to spark some debates and conversations through this. We had almost 500 votes on this particular one. So the question we asked you, see how the screen is dark? I think it's nighttime. Anyways, what do you believe is the most important trait in a leader? So 32% of you said emotional intelligence, 25% of you said strong communication skills, and 24% of you said vision and strategic thinking, with 19% of you saying decisiveness and accountability. What do you think about this, Audrey?
I was in the emotional intelligence camp. I thought about the communication skills because those are important, but if fundamentally you don't have the emotional intelligence, then I think that could be a gap. But yeah, I think it's going to be a hot topic because everyone, is either wants to be a leader, doesn't want to be a leader, is a leader, has a leader that they're working with. So I think it's a good talking point.
Yeah, and it goes straight into the first article that we're going to talk about, but we're not quite there yet. I want to go over some of the comments that we got. Lucas says, choosing the most important trait in a leader is indeed challenging as each element plays a crucial role. In my view, a well-rounded leader possesses a blend of strong communication skills, vision, emotional intelligence, decisiveness, and accountability, which is true. I think at some point we probably need to put in all of the above when we ask these questions. Sam says, surprised at decisiveness and accountability. Not having these in the workplace is my biggest fear. Love that. Okay. And Destiny really loved that one too. Terry was really interested in the results. Pascal said all of the above. Victor said ethically solvent, consistent, and sensitive. Destiny said it actually surprised them as well. And Wen says, if a leader has a clear vision and can express ideas and strategies to their employees and stakeholders, motivation and support will be given. Awesome. Well, thanks so much to everybody who weighed in on the question of the week. Come back every Wednesday because we do ask you a question. So let's get into a bit of a market update. We are going to be talking about the Red Sea in our second article today. So I don't know if you want to touch on that, but I'd love to hear sort of what's going on in your world. What are you keeping an eye on? What's kind of, moving and shaking some of the things that you're doing?
Yeah, because let's be real, it's not just the Red Sea is the only situation at play right now.
That is true. I mean, it might be
It'd be
all that
nice
we're
if it was
hearing about.
contained somewhere, in supply chain, like the Ever Given. It's in the Suez Canal. That's what's happening. We can all look to that. No,
Do you ever
there's a
get
lot.
get
There's a
stuck
lot
again?
No, not again. No. No, I think if you do want some Red Sea updates, I think I mentioned it last time. Lars Jensen over on LinkedIn is doing is really keeping us up to date on what's happening, and what some of the shifts and changes are. I've had quite a focus on the Panama Canal the past week. That's what we're looking at, especially as we head out of sort of Lunar New Year and into what typically in retail is peak season, which is that sort of July, August, September time period. And so we've been seeing a lot of delays going to the canal, the reduced vessels moving through. And so we've been looking at alternatives, which I imagine other people are as well. And of course, your kind of, most basic option is Los Angeles Long Beach Port. And then there's been some rumbling since January. I guess I've seen a few articles since January around East Coast labor and a lot of the articles it's like looming on the precipice. So I think that contract is up in October, and someone can correct me if I'm entirely wrong there. But that's what it looks like. There might be labor action or labor strife between, sort of anywhere between July and October. So right at peak season. I think if the canal situation stays the way it is, New York has been losing some of that Asia routing anyways, because people just don't have time to wait for that to resolve, because of course it's a natural situation. So it's drought or it rains, and that's not very controllable. But then there is concern that, of course, Los Angeles is going to get a huge impact on volume and be congested and not be able to move anything through. So yeah, that's what I've been looking at the last couple of days. So, and I imagine for more people, once they start to settle back in post Lunar New Year, once they start to look at what their production schedules are, what their due dates are, it's going to be on the radar for them as well.
Yeah, so I just did an interview with Ryan Peterson from Flexport for the podcast, which is going to come out in a couple of weeks. And he did mention that labor strike as well. And I kind of said to him, I was like, why can't they just do it all at the same time?
Yeah.
Right? We dealt with West Coast already. That one's done.
Yeah.
Why can't we just do it at the same time? But I think strategically sort of they play off of each other and make sure they get the best deal possible, which I totally get.
Yeah. Which is good. That's what you want. And I mean, and when you look at the items that they're looking for, most of the time these kind of situations are not necessarily unreasonable. When you look at pay scale and wage increases, but typically the main focus the last couple of years with unions has been the automation, right? And the some sense of security or upskilling to be available. Like, not that automation is never going to happen or that it's terrible, but it's how are we aligning, to make it the best transition for everyone, right?
Yeah, and I'm not sure how everybody is thinking about that. And that's kind of a bit of a hint for the next couple of weeks. Anyways, we're going to learn a whole lot more about what's happening in the market when we go to TPM next week, because you and I are going to TPM. Yes. They've got a lot of great sessions talking about what's happening in the market. So I'll have you back after TPM so we can talk a little bit more about what they're predicting and, what they're talking about and all that kind of stuff as well, which I think is going to be important. All right, let's get to our first article. So this article is from Forbes. Now, it caught my eye because it talks about how 70% of employers say creative thinking is most in-demand skill in 2024. Now, I think when they did this survey, if I scroll down a little bit more, they interviewed like 12,000 people or 12,000 leaders for this particular number of 70%. And I was like, creative thinking, supply chain. Well, they talk about how creative thinking and analytical thinking are actually some of the most in-demand skills for 2024. And that will continue into 2027. And I was like, how does that correlate to supply chain? Well, There's 5 areas that creative thinking really helps not only drive your career forward, but also the organization as well. One is career development for you, right? Out of the box thinking, developing new approaches. And when I was reading this, I was like, this is a supply chain professional, right? We are problem solvers. We have to be creative thinkers. We have to be thinking outside of the box. And I get a lot of people who reach out to me and say, what should I upskill? What should I look to do? What should I add to my resume? Well, this is one of the things. And so if you're in an interview, if you're creating that resume letter, cover letter, if you're talking about skills within your resume, this is something to highlight, and definitely something I wanted to talk about today. So what did you think? I'll talk about the other 4 in a minute, but I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, creative thinking can be hard to quantify. So if you're one of those people who's going into an interview and kind of, it's hard to say creative thinking and quantify that to a metric, but it when you focus on the problem solving, the adaptability, one of the further points talks about, being open to new technologies, and new ways of doing things. So I think all of us, getting out of our comfort zone a little bit can be helpful. And we get accustomed to doing things a certain way. And especially we do hear that in this industry, like, well, that's how we've always done it. And you're like, well, there might be a better way than the Post-its and Excel spreadsheets, but, growth can be slow. But yeah, I think, a key thing for anyone for supply chain as well is presenting that, as a curious person who's interested to learn, and not getting fixated on sort of the standard applications and looking at alternatives. I mean, even looking at this, a situation like Panama, or the Red Sea, right? You start to come up with, okay, well, can we move goods by rail? What are my alternative ship modes? Can we shift out our Incoterms? What are our different, so it becomes what are the creative ways we can apply risk management to these situations?
Yeah, absolutely. When you talked about integrating new technology, so under that umbrella, they really talk about leadership, leading with collaboration, because of the multi-generational workforce, right?
Yes.
That is a part of teams and organizations, but also the remote and hybrid environment. So all 3 of those points they're talking about takes creative thinking. So when you're thinking about your resume, when you're thinking about going for a new job, take a look at this particular article and see how they break down the creative thinking and give examples of how you've been able to do this, because I'm pretty sure supply chain professionals have a lot of this. Number 3 is competitive advantage. So what they're saying is that creative thinkers have an eye on the market for opportunities for that organization. And they come up with dynamic solutions, right? Which is what we're talking about. 4 is that it makes you irreplaceable by AI. So you talked about AI and the automation component when we talk about the East Coast negotiations. Creative thinking, it's always something that I've talked about over the last couple of years, is that is irreplaceable. That is what organizations are looking for from the humans that are doing that are in some of those positions, because that is irreplaceable. AI is not going to take over that creative thinking. And number 5, it really shows a growth mindset. So really that learning and growing that everybody has kind of been thinking about, talking about, but let's make it known. But they also talk about being responsible for your own leadership skills. And so this gives you an opportunity to take a look at where you have gaps for that creative thinking, analytical thinking, and when you're thinking about upskilling.
And it's not necessarily the training you're going to get on the job. Beyond you're going to get it on the job because you're going to encounter problems and issues and risks. But yeah, there is some, there's responsibility that you have to take yourself to make sure that, you're able to highlight it or learn how to highlight this in a really clear and concise way.
Yeah, absolutely. So go and check out that article. If you're over on my personal LinkedIn, I will be putting the articles in the comments just a little bit later today, because I've got a call right after this. But we will be putting them in the links for the Let's Talk Supply Chain LinkedIn as we talk through this, if you want to head over there. All right. So our next article, no shipping, no shopping. That is terrifying. That is terrifying. All right, walk me through this one. I've got a whole bunch of hot takes on this, but I will wait for you to run us through this particular article. It's a great article by Lorianne,
Yeah.
and it sort of gives a rundown of what we need to be thinking about.
Right. So we had Congress, of course, the U.S. Congress was getting feedback from some experts. So you have in this article, you've got a maritime consultant, Dr. Bobby. You have, of course, National Retail Federation, who I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with and know people who were there. And so they're talking about how the effects on the impact of the Red Sea situation will have a far greater effect on consumer prices than on the oil market. So that we're seeing that freight prices doubling, smaller merchants are passing on the pricing. And typically the market response is any blockage to shipping is going to have an effect on the supply chain. And typically that's going to be the first thing you're going to notice is delay. But then the second thing you're going to notice is the increasing costs. And so you also had, some of the shipping companies that if they can't sort of get this situation to settle down or resolve, that the continued rise in freight prices is going to kind of keep moving through, the economy. It's an interesting article. It's an interesting concept. I think typically everyone, it's a lever that people pull to push for action as well, though. So I think we have to be aware of that implying that or suggesting that prices are going to increase significantly is also a way to, get people to pay attention, right? And this headline does that as well.
So a couple of things that I want to note from this particular article, and we haven't talked about this a lot since the pandemic, is the seafarers. So
Yes.
the vessels moving through the Red Sea put a lot of things at risk, not only the prices going up, the protection of the cargo, but
Right.
also the protection of the seafarers and the people on the ships. If anybody remembers during the pandemic, and it's something that we probably should be talking a little bit more about, just because of the conditions, right? The conditions through the pandemic for seafarers was very, very difficult. And they're talking about how do we protect those seafarers? And they cannot go through the Red Sea because of the significant risk that it portrays or is for the particular people on this vessel. And so that's another thing that we need to talk about or actually think about. I think the other part of this too is how do you understand the flags in the vessels? Because one of the interesting points that came up, because MSC and Maersk are coming and saying, well, the US government needs to do something about this. And the US government's like, okay, great, but you don't fly our flag. You don't pay our taxes. And so, yes, we hear you. And it's really interesting point about how steamship lines pick the flag that they actually go under to actually move cargo through the different parts of the world. And I don't have the article here. I know that there's a couple of articles out there that actually explains this. So you might want to go research that because it is quite interesting. But the fact that they picked up on it and said, well, wait a second, if you're gonna travel under our flag, that's one thing. If you're not, that might not have an effect. One of the other things is they said that 1 to 2 weeks delays right now, and that could be a domino effect because remember, all of these trade routes, they start one place, they end up at another, and they usually go in a bit of a circle. So if there's 1 to 2 weeks delayed to get here, it's just going to increase on the back end. So something to think about. They also talked about some really big retailers or manufacturers halting some manufacturing, like Tesla, some product delays from companies like Crocs, and that there is a potential for a 38 to 73% increase, I believe, in some of the costs. A lot of companies are using air as an option. Air is up, I think, 6%. I don't know how. I think that really just handles the delay in shipping time. I'm not sure that it really brings the cost down.
No, although the cost hasn't been that high on air going in either. But we'll start to see more of a move now that we're sort of coming out post Lunar New Year. And so we'll see the Asia production schedules come back online. So I think a note on the seafarers too is, there are vessels that are still moving through. So, and something I was talking about with my manager yesterday is that, that's the part that you do kind of stop. Maybe the general public doesn't realize that this is an active situation. So there was what sort of triggered it in December, sort of an attack. And I think what people don't realize is there's consistent missiles and drones and action sort of every day, and if not every day, every couple of days. So there really is a military situation, of a, attack and response that those vessels are trying to navigate around. And then so that well-being of having the vessels divert or being out of that area, is sort of something that can get left to the wayside. And then the flag issue, I mean, there's been a couple of articles. You've got Rose George in her 90% of everything. She covers the flags a little bit as well. And I mean, I think I spoke earlier on an earlier episode this year, the Chinese were using the AIS data and sort of trying to communicate to the Houthis that it's like, oh, but we're Chinese vessels, right? Or we're Chinese flagged vessels, and we're not, these other nations. So definitely is a jockeying around the flags and who gets what. And, thinking of the U.S. military as the world's policeman, right, is a common thing that we do. So.
Well, and MSC, it says that they're the number one in handling U.S. imports. So no matter what flag that they are flying and traveling under, they're still the number one. And depending on what they know, I mean, that could be part of that. All right, let's get to our last article and something that is really close to Audrey's heart. I picked this specifically for her. So this is really interesting because they're talking about paying people to live in a 3D printed habitat on a fake Mars in Houston for 1 year. Now, I know you love space. I've talked about space logistics on this show before. I think it's an important part of our future and definitely something that we need to keep in mind. What do you think about this? I know you just went to, where did you go?
I was at Space Center Houston.
On
Saturday, Feb 10th. So that was great. And if you get to go to any of the space centers or any of the U.S. has some really great museums and experiences like that. So Space Center Houston was a blast. And the Mars thing came up. There's a lot of info on the International Space Center there and the experiences and living conditions of the astronauts and what that is like. And for most, as we move through the technology that's needed to, the actual propeller, the science, the math to get people transiting into space, the next, I think, biggest hurdle is that the sort of human condition and our physicality is not really designed to be hurtled through space and onto different planets. And so this is really interesting experiment to start testing what these conditions might look like. And I think it's IKEA features heavily in the in some of the materials that they're using in this habitat. So that's so it's interesting for to see who gets involved in these sort of public-private businesses. But well, what do you think, Sarah? Like, would you do it? I would do it.
So I totally wouldn't. But I totally know that you would. And I want to ask everybody in the audience because they have 4 paid volunteers right now. And one of the things that I want to point out, so they've got a biologist, a physician, a U.S. Navy microbiologist, but they also have a structural engineer. Now, a lot of supply chain professionals have their engineering degree, and this is only the first of 3 year-long missions. And I would love to see somebody from supply chain in one of these groups because I think it's really important. I mean, at the end of the day, they're talking about growing your own food, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That's fine. But for humans to actually be able to live on Mars or in space or things like that, space logistics will not be far behind. And I think it's an important part of the conversation. And so want to put it out there because I really want to get somebody from supply chain in there. I really hope that it's Audrey Ross. I mean, if it's not, you can always apply and see if it happens. And if it happens, let me know because I want you on the show and I want to hear all about it. So you would totally do this?
I mean, I would love to go to space. I mean, there's a huge desire for me to go to space. I don't know if I would want to live with strangers for like 4 months in some prefabricated house in the desert, but
All right.
you never know.
Well, we are almost at the end, and I want to let everybody know where we're going to be. So,
Yeah.
Law Tech Live again is Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern, and it looks like Eric is having a Mexican party, Mexican freight fiesta. So, I don't know if any of you are planning to join it, but I highly recommend it because Eric doesn't party too much. It looks like he's going to party on Friday, and you definitely want to be there. All right, March 14th at 10 a.m. PST, I am going to be hosting a webinar, How Data Accuracy Drives Efficiency at Aeronet Worldwide. We're going to dive deep into what it actually means for 3PLs and forwarders, that technology, that data accuracy. So definitely go and register at the link. And then I'm also hosting a webinar in conjunction with Supply Chain Brain and Reveal about parcel shipping and style. And we're going to be talking about an apparel case study that you won't want to miss out on. And then, of course, Audrey Ross, if I could get your name right.
Yeah.
And I will be live and in person next week for TPM, March 3rd through 6th at the Long Beach Convention Center. If you're there, please come and say hi. We would love to see you. We've got a jam-packed schedule, but we'd love to see everybody. And Mike Cadu says, Audrey for president. I love it. Thanks for joining us, Mike. Thanks everybody for joining us. Audrey, thanks for joining me. And I'll see you guys all in a couple weeks because Christine is going to be hosting while we are at TPM.